lacks a comprehensive system to help our young people learn the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities and information to move into the labor market and to be an effective person in that labor market, for a career in that labor market. Now, lest one identify this as purely an educational problem, we are not maintaining competitive role in the world markets. I would like to also focus on the fact that most of our educational programs in the secondary level are geared to the so-called college prep. When I launched the community college system in my state many years ago, I took notice of the educational snobbery that had grown up to infect our curriculum, looking somewhat like a prison. That was a kind of delineation we made, and we haven't changed that much over the years. And yet, when you consider that only 15% of those who enter college in the late 20s have not yet found steady jobs. So I think we ought to look at it from the human point of view, the domestic economic, but also the global. I want to also indicate that in my full statement, I had legislation that we have before us does focus on the non-college bound student, and it also takes some very major steps in taking the whole political system and reviewing the regulatory parts of the federal system as it relates to flexibility in the educational institutions. I'm glad to see that this same feature is a part of this bill that I'm honored to co-sponsor under the requests of the Secretaries of Labor and of Education. I think we also understand that this does lift to our focus the interdependence between the educational programs and the labor market, or the interdependence of those two, from school to job transition. And that, to me, is the guts of the whole matter. Recently, I had the GAO launch a study that I hope will be completed shortly, as to the overlapping of the duplicating among the 151, Mr. Chairman, 151 education and training programs currently run by 14 different agencies of the federal government. With our timber workers in great distress in my part of the country, we are especially aware of these programs and the multiplicity, the overlapping. And this bill, I think, does much to at least bring a sharper focus to the federal role. I think I would like to also make a comparison on the practicality of the current labor force in the market. Mr. Chairman, this is not a bill that is total. This bill is a major step, a giant step. But there are parts of this bill that I hope maybe we can modify or at least add to, and that is the current labor force. Let me delineate between the bill's focus of the prospective labor force and what we face today in the current labor force. To best illustrate that point, today the Japanese worker in the automobile assembly business, he gets a 315.5 hours of training as a newly hired automobile worker. That compares to 45.7 hours in the United States. So we're even at the moment falling behind in the competitiveness for efficiency and high skills. Last year, Senator Kennedy and I introduced a bill which was a result of the study made by former Secretary of Labor Marshall under President Carter and former Secretary of Labor Brock under President Reagan. And that bill that we introduced was the high skills. We were saying that, in effect, that it is not low wages that will determine the profits for American industry to get more competitive in the world market. Not lower wages, but higher skills. Because we're still locked into the Taylor model of our business industrial life of this country that's going to have to call for us to divest ourselves of that approach of a small elite of managers and a whole workforce out there on the front lines saying, in effect, the only way we increase productivity is to do that routine faster, faster, faster. Well, that is not the answer. The rest of the world has found it. We haven't found it yet. And I would refer that bill to you as well to be considered on this subject of bringing higher skills of the workforce in order to be more competitive. One last point, and is that we find today some alarming statistics of what's happening to our labor force, the current labor force. And that is the National Center on Education and the Economy. Since 1969, they have studied and found that earnings have fallen 12%, the wage earner. And furthermore, that the income of our top 30% of earners have increased their wages, while the other 70% have spiraled downward. And a lot of those have plummeted downward. And that division between our economic society, in my view, is another serious issue we must address. So I want to again say thank you for permitting me to testify here today. I want to indicate to you that on our appropriations bill that we now have on the floor, Labor HHS, we have included, Mr. Chairman, $100 million in anticipation of this committee's action for this bill and to launch this bill under the leadership of Secretary Reich and Secretary Riley. So thank you very much for the privilege
We
of testifying.
thank you, and your presence here and that of our colleague Senator Dernberger as well as Senator Wofford indicates the bipartisan nature of this effort. And I would add we have a panoply of organizations endorsing it, labor, management, education groups. I think we can move ahead very, very quickly. I might mention to my colleagues that I have held off making an opening statement so we can get the secretaries in before we go over to the floor.
I will too, if I can put mine in the record and congratulate them for this good and important bill that even despite the fact that it resembles the one you and I authored, I want to wholeheartedly support.
I thank you, and your statement will be entered in the record. My staff tells me that Secretary Riley is to go first. Is that correct? I have no preference here.
I think that's right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This on the basis of age, or what is the?
I do not know.
Respect.
All right, Mr. Secretary, Secretary Riley, we will hear from you.
K-12 comes before the job, I think, and that's Mr. Chairman and Senators Wofford and Dernberger. I want to thank Senator Hatfield for his statement and his strong interest in this area and revealing information. And I'm certainly pleased to be here with Secretary Reich and in support of this measure. Early this month, I had the opportunity, along with Secretary Reich, to go to Delaware with the President to launch this new initiative. And it was really a wonderful way to kick off this program, which is really all about a jump start for young people. That's what we're really doing. We're launching an initiative that will eventually help millions of young people to jump start their careers. Every year, as was pointed out, a couple of million young people begin high school, and then, of course, a great majority, 75% or so, don't finish the four-year program. These young people are really the heart and soul of the American workforce and our future. Many of these students will just drift through school. They'll sit in the back of the classroom, they'll get their C's, and then when they graduate, suddenly they realize that they have no idea how to get a job, how to connect up with that. No family connections, no specific skills, no understanding about how to hook themselves into the economy. And this is not always their fault. We've gotten into the habit of thinking that education is kind of like an assembly line. It's the old industrial vision of education, and it doesn't work anymore. Our children are smarter than we think. One of the reasons they turn off from school is that sometimes it's simply a remarkably boring experience. It becomes routine, unchallenging, and if a child is subjected to a watered-down curriculum, well, pity for that poor child. Then we wonder why they drown themselves in television or finally give up and sometimes, as we know, drop out. And we never really answer a basic question for them: why do I have to learn all of this? We haven't done a very good job of making the connection between learning a paycheck and some basic career goals. So they come out of school oftentimes uninspired, and in some cases without even the most basic skill. The National Adult Literacy Study found that about 20% of people with the lowest level of literacy have high school diplomas. So what do? They bounce around, they take any job to get by, they live from paycheck to paycheck, if they can find work at all. Almost a third never figure out a real career path until they're some 30 years old. And that's about a decade after they graduate. To my mind, that goes a long way toward explaining why our economy sometimes seems very tired and sluggish. We need to reinvent the American school to find a way to catch the attention of these young people, to help them get a focus on life a little earlier. We can't continue to sort students into either a college track or a general track that really leads to nowhere in particular. The high school of the future is going to have to give our young people a solid academic background that meets high standards, the kind of standards that would be established under Goals 2000, the Educate America Act, which will be benchmarked to the highest standards in the world. At the same time, we will have to get them thinking about life beyond high school, to give them the opportunity to choose from a series of career paths, to be able to enter programs like the one the President visited this month, one that starts them on a path towards getting a portable and nationally recognized credential, a skills certificate that tells every employer that these young people know what they are doing. And that's what the School to Work Opportunities Act hopes to achieve. If we do it right, and we can prepare these young people for even more sophisticated training at the community and four-year college level. And I want to thank Secretary Reich for his leadership in this effort, certainly Senator Hatfield as he joins us today. Our two departments, Labor and Education, have worked hand in hand, both on Goals 2000 and on this companion initiative. And I can tell you that this type of cooperation is one sure way to reinvent government. The theme of reinventing government is a cornerstone of this legislation. In order to build school-to-work systems, we will have to reinvent the whole federal-state community partnership. The development of these school-to-work systems won't work if we think in terms of a federal one-size-fits-all model. There's an enormous amount of creativity in this country, and this new initiative is designed to take advantage of this creativity, to build upon the innovative programs that some states and communities have already started. As a former governor, I know what a difference it makes to have the flexibility to craft your own solution to fit the particular economy of your state and your community. And that's why this legislation includes waiver provisions to give states and communities the flexibility they need to create a school-to-work system, one that encourages creativity to integrate existing federal programs like the Carl Perkins Act and JTPA to support the development of a comprehensive school-to-work system. Under this legislation, the federal role is really to promote the creation of school-to-work systems at the state and local levels. We'll provide the seed capital to help the states get started. Conceptually, we'll frame the picture by setting out three core components that every school-to-work program should have. And then we will give states and communities the latitude that they need to fill in the details. First, every program will incorporate work-based learning, including paid work experience, workplace mentoring, broad instruction in industry-specific skills, and a sequential program of job training experiences with skills to be mastered at increasingly higher levels. Second, every program will include school-based learning and a program of study that meets challenging academic standards developed under Goals 2000. Students will have regularly scheduled evaluations to identify strengths and weaknesses, They will have counseling to identify their interests and explore careers, and they will choose a career major by no later than the 11th grade. Work-based and school-based learning will culminate in the award of high school diplomas and skills certificates that are recognized by the industries studied and for the students that they will train. Finally, local programs will be required to provide connecting activities that are essential to matching students with employers and bridging the worlds of school and work. Technical assistance and services will be provided to employers to help them design their programs of study. And after completing the program, students will get help in finding an appropriate job, in continuing their education, or in entering an additional training program. Relationship between Goals 2000 and School to Work is important. It is importance of high academic and skilled standards of Goals 2000, making an integral part of the success of what we're trying to accomplish in this new program. Through Goals 2000, we hope to create challenging voluntary national standards for core academic courses. States will use these standards as benchmarks in developing their own high standards. Students in School to Work programs will be expected to meet these high academic standards. In addition, Goals 2000 also promotes the development of national skill standards. A student who successfully completes a School to Work program will earn a skill certificate benchmark to these national skill standards. The skill standards set by the National Board will state plainly that which a person should know and be able to do in a broad range of occupations. And what does this mean for an employer? It will give them some sense of security that a student who walks into their office with a skill certificate already has some of the basic skills needed to function in their industry. Students, for their part, will know that a skill certificate earned in Illinois will be respected from Oregon to Maine. In closing, I believe this legislation will go a long way, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, toward answering a question that students have been asking for generations: why do I have to learn this? In the end, they will come to realize the truth of the reminder that President Clinton has so often issued, that the more you learn, the more you earn. Thank you, sir.
We thank you. We've been pleased to be joined by Senator Thurmond and Senator Pell. Because of our roll calls, we're entering our statements in the record, if that's all right with the two senators.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent in my statement following the record.
It will be entered in the record, and Senator Pell's will be also. Secretary Reich, we're happy to have you here. And let me just say, as one who has been here through Democratic and Republican administrations and who has seen a lot of turf battles, one of the things that is impressive is how the Secretary of Education and the Secretary of Labor are working together in this administration, and that is a tribute to both of you, and we thank you both. Secretary Reich.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. 7 months ago, Secretary Riley and I articulated the problem. There is a growing gap between those who are prepared for work and those who are not prepared for work. During the 1980s, the earnings gap doubled. It continues to widen. This is an enormous social problem. If you're in the 25% of Americans who have a college degree, you are on a slightly upward escalator in terms of your earnings. If you do not have a 4-year college degree, you are on a downward escalator. If you just have a high school degree, a very profoundly, if just less than a high school degree, you're on a very quick downward escalator. The gap is widening. Now, why is that the case? It's widening for two reasons. Number one, because of technology. If you're well prepared, technology is your friend. It's your ally. It enhances the value that you're adding. If you're not prepared, technology is supplanting you. We have a lot of examples. Automated tellers instead of bank tellers. Automated switching machinery instead of telephone operators. Also, international trade. It's good for America. It's good for everyone. But if you are not prepared to be a player in the global economy. There are 12,000 people entering the world economy every week, the vast majority of whom would be delighted to work for a small fraction of your prevailing wages. And I can guarantee you, most of these people are working for far lower wages than the average Mexican.